Hello and welcome everyone to this audio conversation about the making of a new research project as part of the Visual Embodied Methodology Venn Network's Intersectional Gender Violence Program. This work package is looking to co-develop and co-create intergenerational stories of migrant women's resistance and activism against different types of violence through a number of different art forms. It is called Imagine Resistance Among Migrant Women, Transgenerational Stories of Activism. And we are joined here by the co-investigator of the Venn research, Professor Cathy McIlwaine, based in the Geography Department at King's College London, and Carolina Cao, founder and creative director of MINA, Migrants in Action. I'm Renata Peppl, and I'll be mediating this conversation. I'm a program manager at Queen Mary University of London and co-director at MINA. I'm going to let you guys talk in a second, and I just want to say that I think it's fair to say that the collaboration between the three of us spans many years now, and we've decided to record this chat to document and cover aspects of working with social science research and how this links to creative approaches and arts-based methods. And we would like to look back over the past experiences and look forward to our exciting new program that we are about to embark on. So I will make a start, and thank you for joining us on this conversation. So Cal and Cathy, shall we tell the people listening what we are planning to create with this project and what is the Venn research?
Maybe I can start on the VEM side of things, and then I'll hand over to Carolina to say a little bit more about the arts-based work that we're doing. So this is one of 4 work packages within this network grant that you've just introduced, Renata. And it's a specific project looking at resistance amongst migrant women and types of activism. And what we really want to do is think about this in terms of transgenerational and intergenerational stories. So different generations of migrant women who come from what we're calling the global majority world, but sometimes called the global South. And so what we really want to do is really capture the narratives and experiences of women, young, middle-aged, elderly, how they've resisted violence, coped with violence, and developed activism around violence. And we want to do that through arts-based approaches. And I'm going to hand over to Carolina to tell us a bit more about what we're planning to do.
Well, from Mina's side, I think so far we've worked only with the Latin American community in the UK, and for the first time we're gonna work with wider global South, which includes like women from Pakistan, India, Iran, Iraq, Jamaica, Nigeria, Angola, Cape Verde, and so many other countries. So women from all parts of the global South will come together, and then we use theater, photography, body movement to discuss and resistance, forms of resistance, but also find our commonalities. So together we're going to discuss all those forms of resisting violence in diaspora, as well as in our own countries. And for that, we're going to use the arts.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Cathy, going back to you, this current research is an evolving work that dates back more than a decade of transnational research you've been leading with migrant women. Can you elaborate briefly on this long journey leading up to here?
Yes, Renata, we've been on an amazing and very collaborative journey over the past decade or so. And as briefly as I can possibly make it, it started around 2004 and 2005 when I started to work and conduct research with the Latin American community in London. And I was thinking back, and it involved about 5 projects, really to think through at the beginning about providing population estimates, a sort of a baseline profile, thinking about the challenges facing the Latin American community. But what was core to this work was thinking through gender issues. As a result of this work, one of the issues that kept coming up was violence against women and girls, and actually the lack of research on this. So at the same time, I have a background of working on urban and gendered violence in Latin America especially in Colombia and Guatemala. This dates back to the 1990s, and we won't go there. But basically, when an opportunity for funding came up, it was actually to focus on Brazil. So we applied for a research grant to look at gender-based violence amongst Brazilian migrant women in London, but also women living in the favelas of Maré in Rio de Janeiro. And this was in 2016. And a key aspect of this research was working with a range of different arts organizations, led throughout by People's Palace projects. But we also worked in London with the Casa Latin American Theatre Festival. And then obviously more recently, what we're going to talk about now, we've started working with Migrants in Action and Carolina, Renata and the team. And all of this has been thinking about, and we'll talk a bit more about that, about thinking how we understand gender-based violence more effectively and how we communicate and raise awareness around it through the arts.
I guess you start off with very traditional methods of research, and then across the years with these collaborations that were facilitated, the projects became more and more, innovative in terms of methodology, correct?
Yes, no, absolutely. We started off doing surveys, doing in-depth interviews and focus groups. And then in terms of the arts, and this is where I think it's really interesting to where we've arrived at this co-created way of working with MENA, is that in the sort of the early 2016, 2017 research, we took the more traditional approach, which was we handed over our surveys, our interviews to an artist. In London, it was a London-based Brazilian writer and director and actor called Gael Lecornec. And in Rio, it was a theatre maker called Bia Lessa. But we handed over the research to them and they created art from it. And it was a very, very interesting process. It was very exciting, and it was actually successful in terms of public engagement and speaking to lots of audiences. But we realized once it was finished that actually it didn't really engage the research participants. It was more sort of a curatorial perspective. So more recently, we've started to work in a much more participatory and co-created way.
Great. Yeah. And we'll get to speak a bit more about this. And I'll move on to Carl because we are talking about arts-based methods. Carl is a theater maker, is a facilitator and founder of MENA. And I'll first ask, before we move into the intersection between arts organizations and research and applied arts methods, can you talk a little bit just what is MENA to the people listening to us?
Yes. So basically, MENA uses the arts to co-create social change with women from the global majority. So I tend to say there are two different stages. So the first one is where women come together to share their stories, connect to one another, and reconnect to themselves and their journeys as migrant women. And then the second stage is when, after building trust, creating our collective narrative, we share our art to wider audience and open up the dialogue on what we could do to change the situation that we bring up in our art. So first we need to that process of like coming together, finding our own narrative, and then we open up an open dialogue to see what we could actually change collectively and socially.
Can we talk a little bit about what co-creating arts-based research methodologies mean and why it's so important in today's academic and artistic landscape? Who would like to give it a go first? Kathy, maybe?
I think in terms of it relates really to the pathways that I've just been talking about. But I think it's also about the ways in which increasingly social scientists and actually other scientists have started working with the arts and artists and artistic organizations in ways that I think are actually mutually beneficial. So for academics, you know, I would argue, and other people argue this as well, it actually allows them to understand processes often much more clearly and in a more ethical way, particularly when it's a co-created participatory form of creative engagement. It also allows them to work and to reach audiences that normally an academic would never have access to. You know, normally the academic work stays in the book, stays in the journal paper, and no one ever ultimately ever really reads it. The working in this way, from an academic perspective, we can reach beyond that, as well as, and Carolina can say more about that, as well as really working with research participants in terms of, you know, a therapeutic dimension and a transformative dimension, which I think is also really, really important. And then super quickly, one final issue is really to mention the impact agenda, which is really, really important in universities today. And I think working with the arts allows many academics to address this impact agenda. In other words, reaching beyond the academy, reaching new audiences, potentially influencing policy, and then thinking about sort of transformation beyond the academic research.
Cal, would you like to add anything?
The main changes, I think, when we collaborate with arts and when we collaborate with arts and research is like we, coming from a community-based perspective, we no longer a subject of research, but we are actors of our own change. Mina was born basically out of the need from like for seeing our bodies, our faces, our experience told by us community members. How can we change that and make them own their stories? And in our previous project, we see women themselves going to Oxford University and other spaces telling their own story, and then we can see the impact it has in their own life.
Yeah, I think that's completely correct. And also, I think that we explore in this partnership here, I mean, ways as well to give women who were part of like previous research in a way to look back at the data, something that is never normally done, you know, in academia, and actually reflect on that, on the project We Still Fight in the Dark. The participants actually look at the data that Cathy compiled in the 2016 research around gender-based violence in London. And we're able to reflect on that data and what it meant to them. So I guess that shifts the power structures in a way. And as Carl said, it kind of like makes communities own their own narratives, you know.
Yeah, no, and just for instance, like Cathy's research, We Still Fight in the Dark, it says like the data is 82% of Brazilian women has experienced some form of gender-based violence. So when a Brazilian woman who experienced gender violence see this big number, that's that feeling of like, I'm not alone, it's not only me. So that creates also a sense of like, this is not my issue, but is a social issue, is a collective issue, so that we need to face and change collectively.
And maybe I can also come in here and from an academic perspective and say that it's really about, this type of approach is really about moving away from an extractive way of conducting research, where you just go in, you interview someone and you walk away, and you don't develop a relationship. There's no sustainability within it, and it's really, you know, it's sometimes called, you know, pirate research or helicopter research, and this is not what this is. This is developing proper relationships, and as we've just been talking about, allowing women to reinterpret the research from their perspective. And as an academic also, it is really important that it's not always very comfortable to do that, because you have the research participants telling you what you did wrong and what you interpreted, you know, potentially not in the wrong way, but, you know, pointing out issues that actually that's not actually the case. And you know, it can be uncomfortable to hear that sometimes, but it's still, for me, it's a much more rewarding way to do academic research.
Thank you. And Cathy, I mean, you touched on something that I'm going to ask you guys right now. It's which is very important in the projects that we are delivering. How do we navigate power dynamics and ensure that the participation is distributed equally among all stakeholders when you are co-creating projects? Is a difficult, I guess, issue to discuss. How do we make sure that we are sharing the power?
Yeah, it is. It's a tricky issue, and I've been thinking about this over the last few years, actually, and I think there's a couple of things. One is the sort of the shared decision making, which is not just about me, for example, as the academic creating a project and then saying, oh, I've created a project, I've got the funding, and then I'm going to hand it over to the organization. That just can't work, and it will never ever be successful. So we're really talking about co-design in projects, and the research has to address issues that are relevant for the community and for the community organization. So I think this sort of shared decision making and co-design is really important. The other thing is also from a research perspective, actually ensuring that the organizations are properly paid, that the research participants are properly paid, that they have a right to speak, that they have a right to decide what goes in or what goes out of a piece of art or whatever it might be, and that it's not my, as the director of a project, it doesn't all come back to me to make those decisions. I have to take one step back in order to allow a more equitable set of relationships, actually.
I would just say one thing about the project that we've been delivering with Mina and with Kathy is that I can see now the pathway evolving, and many women who were in the first project, participants, have now come back as maybe writers, as maybe producers, and I hope with this next project that we are embarking on that they can also be involved in some way, and also the research and the data of this material. So this is very exciting. And just following up on that, are there any like insights or lessons learned in the past years with co-creating arts research that you guys can share?
Maybe I can just come in and say something, which was actually, as you were talking, Renata, that also made me think about the fact that our journey, it's a long journey, but it probably would have been a very short journey if we hadn't trusted each other and we hadn't trusted our different roles in this process. And I think we've developed a way of working that, you know, we make sure everyone knows what's going on, that we're telling everyone what's happening all the time, without saying you must do this or you must do that. And it's absolutely essential. If you don't have that level of trust amongst, in this case, the three of us, then it's never going to work. Because it comes back to what you were saying, Carolina, about this sort of horizontal structure. It has to be based on a much flatter structure than you would necessarily get in a traditional research project, for example, because otherwise it's impossible to work. So trust is absolutely key. And we also have to put our hands up when we make mistakes. We have made mistakes, and I've certainly made mistakes about approaching things in particular ways. One thing that maybe I can just briefly mention, because we've learned in this new project that we're doing, because as I said, in the past we used to do the social science work and then hand it over to the artist, but then in the Who's Behind Your Order project, which is a photo voice project that we did, what we forgot to do, we sort of forgot to do interviews with the women. And so then when I started thinking about, how can we make this into something academic? So we produced this wonderful exhibition and booklet and everything. I was thinking, gosh, we never actually sat down and did an interview with these women. So then this time, what we're going to be doing is actually ensuring that we do these, it's narratives, it's stories. We're going to make sure that we actually do that in a more, well, I think it's a more interesting than just the sort of in-depth interview approach, but to make sure also we do it at the end. So we don't do it at the beginning, we do it after we do the arts-based work, which I think was your idea, Renata. But it's so important, I think, just again thinking about how you tie the traditional research methods with the arts-based, and learning for what works and what doesn't work.
Cal, would you like to add anything?
One of the lessons learned when we work with universities is just like on the importance of accessing those spaces that women wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So like entering King's College, like going, like exploring the rooms and the inside was such an amazing experience for participants in the past that and sometimes we take for granted. So I think like access to spaces, it's key as well. So usually it's always like we always othered, so we're talking about them, and then suddenly someone put hands up. It's like, no, you're talking about me. So the conversation will change because you will not say the same thing in front of the person you're talking about, right? So it changed. You changed the tone, you changed everything. And again, I think it's very enriching and uncomfortable, as you mentioned earlier. But this is so important as well for like to promote change in all aspects. So, and then we say like we never go by ourselves, just like one or two of us. We tend to go in big groups. So to make that impact as well, we are here, not here alone. We are a collective of people with lived experience, and we're here to tell our own stories. And this is so powerful. And we often talk about it. It's like whenever we enter the room, so everybody looks, I was like, who are they? We're not supposed to be here, but we are.
Shall we talk about then, in a very practical way, what are we going to do, and what is the methodology that we are using for this new project?
I mean, I maybe should just say that I'm really interested from an academic point of view about thinking through generations, because that's where the change often lies. Well, not often, I think the change always lies in generational change. So we know that things are difficult. Certainly things like gendered violence to change overnight. It's really hard to change the structures, to change behavior, to change cultures. But I think it absolutely changes over generations. And so I think it's going to be amazing to listen to the stories of women from different generations, to try and really find out, to really explore, what was it like as an elderly woman, I don't know, 50 years ago, wherever, in whatever country she came from, and then talk to a woman maybe in her 20s. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. And the fact that we've got people coming from different cultures as well, in different countries, I think we're going to learn so much about the similarities around how you deal with, how you resist, how you develop activism against gendered violence, but also some differences, and learning, mutual learning. We're sort of switching it around. We're not taking existing research. We're actually, and then doing something with it. We're going to start using the various sort of applied, arts types of approaches and workshops, and then see how that develops, and as you mentioned, creating rapport amongst the group, what they also want, what they're interested in within the sort of the broad parameters of what we want to do. Is there anything that they really want to focus on? And then start asking them to tell their more formal stories at the end.
And I think the most, obviously we've got the whole plan and whole structure, but I think we leave a lot of space for co-creation and for women to bring their own inputs as well, because most of them there are a total of 20 women that we haven't met before, just probably 5 of them. Like I've been speaking on the phone with them, just like, oh, I have no story of resistance, but I came from Iran, I've got a baby, and I want to be part of the project. I was like, and you have no stories of resistance? How come? Just like, oh, that's true. So these things this also can be a story. I was like, obviously. So we're gonna, like, we women are so used to undermine our existence and undervalue our experiences. So that would be an opportunity to put our stories out there and be proud of it.
And it's worth to say to the people listening to us that And this reinforces again the power of actually partnering with grassroots organizations. We had over 130 women who signed up to be part of this project. And I think that shows a lot of interest in actually, being part of a collective narrative, bringing together the voices, and sharing with a wider audience. And so we have these 20 women that are working with us from different cultures who don't normally actually shares common spaces in London. For instance, Latin American women, I think they rarely have experience with Southeast Asian women in the city. How amazing would it be? Will it be actually to have these women all together in the same room, creating stories together?
Perhaps one final thing to say is that, as I said at the beginning, we're one of 4 work packages. And we also plan, we're going to see how it works out, but to actually think about potentially using some of the methods, particularly the banner making, to work with the other work packages as well. To think about how we can join up the work packages as part of the wider VEM project. So that's going to be exciting too, I think. So rather than us working in 4 separate silos, we're going to be coming together. So I think that's going to potentially be really exciting.
Yes, very exciting indeed. And we cannot wait, I guess, to share more in the future about this work. I think sadly we need to stop here, although I know there is so much more that we can expand on this work. We'll just end then saying that the VAN project is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, ESRC. And thank you so much to all the people that stayed with us until the end of this conversation. And we'll invite you to follow us both on the VAN Instagram at van_KCL and the Mina Instagram as well at Mina_theater. Thank you so much and see you next time.